Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. Hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. Today, we are gathering to pick up where we left off before the weekend began. That's talking more about Marathon and Bungie. And to say that this has been a mess would be an understatement. I've had those gut bubble Taco Bell dumps that are straight up less messy than what's going on here. That's how bad we're talking when it comes to Bungie and Marathon, because at first it was just gameplay concerns. Oh, the artistic identity is kind of unique. The vibe is cool. But then you look at the gameplay, you're like, what part of the shooter fan base is this serving? It's casual enough to be a hero shooter, I guess, but you're trying to take over the extraction shooter genre. But then Arc Raiders is here giving people what they want with very basic features oh, hey, proximity chat, that sort of stuff. And then you have the hardcore part of the extraction shooter genre, in Tarkov, just looking at this game going, what is this for? So that was already a problem, and Bungie was clearly not ready for launch, talking about 1 to 2 maps and maybe proximity chat later. And so again, they were just not ready. It was already going to be somewhat messy, and they had a lot to justify. And then you throw what we talked about in our last Marathon video on top of it all, accusations about plagiarism that Bungie has now admitted to. And the situation gets worse because now we have an update on what's going on internally over at Bungie, and we're going to talk about that here today alongside PlayStation's absolutely marvelous failure when it comes to the live service initiative. We'll detail all of that and more here today. So if you're new here and you're into what's going on, it's quite chaotic here in the games industry, consider subscribing. Let's start off with the report that comes from Paul Tassi of Forbes. The headline is, New Marathon Info, Bungie Morale, Launch Worries, and Changing Plans. I've spoken to some current and former employees about Bungie's excuse for the art theft, studio morale, the possibility of a delay, and some very real changes when it comes to the upcoming presentation and playtesting of the game. Here's what I've learned. Point 1. The public explanation for the art theft, one ex-employee taking things in 2020 is the same one being given internally at Bungie among rank and file. This comes across as no surprise to me, because if it's not the truth, which I think we all have a good reason to be skeptical of that truth, then to me, just putting that truth out internally and not keeping it on a need-to-know basis is probably in Bungie's best interest to cover up this mess as much as they possibly can. Because no doubt, if they were like, yeah, actually, it was our whole art team, for example, that would leak and that would look really bad. So they would then be lying to the public. So they had to keep that consistent. That doesn't surprise me that this is what they're saying internally. What's more interesting is how they're moving forward here. Paul Tassi writes, Sony and Bungie Legal are now sorting through this, and there is unlikely to be any new information as all of this continues to unfold. It is not clear how long an audit will take of the assets to remove or find any more plagiarism, as it's expansive enough of a process to have Bungie not even showing any footage at all in its recent live stream, which we also talked about in our last video. Morale is in a free fall across all departments, and the vibes have never been worse. Everyone has the same concerns about what happens to Bungie as a studio if Marathon bombs, which is something they absolutely cannot afford. Let's pause there. This is also something I briefly touched on with our last video. I use a programmer as an example. Imagine being a programmer, you're just doing your job, putting together the gameplay experience, making all the buttons work, right? Doing the things that Bungie does. I think the best games are formed by not saying well, I did my job, you do yours, but there is a level of hey, I've done my part, and as long as you do your part, we're all doing our parts together. They should come together as something special. So imagine putting in those years of work into this and then finding out another department has completely blundered all those years of effort. As a creative, that is really something that will gut you. And especially when you are a creative for a living and your living is justified by the product's performance on the market, and this game is being set up to now fail epically, it is a very scary moment for people who had nothing to do with why this game will fail. Again, there were already gameplay concerns from a design level. That is a conversation we can also have, but now you kind of put the dagger in there with what's going on with the art team. And it's well, most people in their right mind aren't going to outwardly support this, especially if Bungie and PlayStation plan to charge $40 for it, like they have previously confirmed it will be a premium product at the very least. So yeah, I can't imagine morale after what happened with Destiny 2, and then layoffs after their best expansion for Destiny 2 reportedly, and then on top of that, you have Marathon, this next thing that has to be big, and everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Yeah, I imagine most people there feel like they're on a timer, especially because the last round of layoffs kicked long-term Bungie staff out that defined what that company was. So why would anyone feel safe at this point in time? So I get it. Morale, understandably, is at a low because there's also not enough time to turn all this around. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Concluding these bullet points here, Paul writes, there are not even hints or jokes about a delay from the September release date internally. With that said, it's entirely possible, if not likely, those conversations are happening privately between higher-up Sony and Bungie leadership. It's unclear what the plan is to launch the game in a now actively hostile environment just a few months from now, or how to turn that around. Continuing on, Paul writes, some changes to future plans had been made even before this new plagiarism development, mainly as a reaction to gameplay footage and now the closed alpha. First point is, at the start of this month, Bungie pulled the plug on its main marathon marketing plan, which was going to have a trailer in June along with the launch of pre-orders. The whole campaign now needs to be reworked. And again, keep in mind, the top point there, this was before the whole plagiarism thing. So they were already overhauling marketing plans before there was any claims of plagiarism. And then a heavily marketed public beta in August may be changed into a roadmap of public playtests with no actual details set yet. This would align with Bungie's stated multiple opportunities to play before launch rather than the upcoming beta. And the last point here is Marathon was originally pitched by higher up good old boy Bungie leadership. And as far back as 5 years ago, devs were telling them what would and wouldn't work and were often ignored. Many have previously said that it needed to have some sort of PvE component. Here's the interesting conversation about a delay. Is there are people who are talking about this game like it actually straight up might get shut down. And I do think that that's a very tough thing to imagine. It would be unprecedented. So it's possible, but I do think a lot of it depends on how deep the plagiarism runs. And if it is like a full overhauling of the entire asset library, that might propose a conversation of like how long it takes to retool this game and if it is worth, even with all those years of investment, bringing it to market. And after Concord, you just have to look at like how unprecedented that failure was and how quickly Sony was like, 2 weeks is enough. We don't need to see more. Where I could see some sort of cutthroat approach here being like, oh, you need 24 months to put this all back together and get it cleaned up. That's 20, and especially when we know what this is going to do on the market. No, we're good. We're good. So while I think it is still in that very speculative, unlikely area of a full-on cancellation, the fact that it is an open realm of conversation and even possibility off the top of the head is crazy to think about. What seems more likely is a delay. Again, the question is how long and if they can even get one. But a delay, I think, only serves one thing. It's number one, trying to overhaul that library of assets and trying to get as much plagiarism out as you can. But I think the other avenue of it is really, if you're looking at it from a business angle, it's just creating space between the controversy and when the game inevitably releases. Like, there's no world where a delay overhauls a lot of the gameplay concerns that we have. Maybe with that extra time, they get an opportunity to add those sort of things in. I could see a benefit because already we were talking about how on Defining Duke, I think Marathon clearly needed a delay anyway, but it wasn't going to get it. Now that it's like a disaster level, if they're going to choose to allocate more budget to the project and give it more time before it hits the market, then maybe some features that are missing, like proximity chat, might actually be there at launch and give people a little bit of like, okay, hey, like this is a shit show, but at least you got basic features that were expected for your genre. But otherwise, again, I just don't see a world where these delays do anything significant for the game other than creating space away from that controversy for people to not be as tight as they were in this moment in time. And maybe at launch, I guess, hoping that they'd be a little bit more receptive. But I just think the fact that we're having that sort of open conversation of like, does it get canceled, is crazy to think about. That is the update from Paul Tassi. Where I think things get even more interesting is when you again assess PlayStation in this disastrous failed live service initiative. Like, I think anyone could have told you this was not worth it at all, because it's not just happening here with Bungie and the investment they put into them of $3.6 billion. It's also studios that they've helped build from the ground up, like Haven Studios, which was head up by Jade Raymond, who is a acclaimed Ubisoft director slash producer who hasn't put anything out since like 2017. And this is still a name that makes some noise in the industry, but she has now left Haven Studios behind, as reported and confirmed by Bloomberg, with a spokesperson from PlayStation saying that there are now 2 studio co-heads at the lead for Fair Games. This gets into a whole diatribe that I've gone on a couple of times before, but I'll just say that, like, There are certain what I call legacy studios that I will keep my eye on. Like I think of what James Olin is doing with Archetype. James Olin, of course, one of the lead men on the beautiful Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and you have Drew Karpyshyn there. Like you have OG BioWare heads there. But at the end of the day, even these legacy names, as we've seen time in, time out from ex-BioWare talent, ex-EA talent, Activision, everywhere, ex-Dead Space talent, everywhere. It doesn't matter how brilliant of a mind you are. Game development is teamwork, right? So I think of it a lot like a sports team. Hey, if you watch hockey, look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? You have these absolute studs, these stars, these incredible talents, but there's no true like leadership on the squad where they aren't really cohesive as a unit, and they're just a bunch of talented people playing together rather than a team effort. Same thing happens with game development. You need a team effort. That means people wearing multiple hats, sometimes going outside of their job ramifications for the better of the entertainment product. And that only comes from a very good team environment. And of course, like great work conditions where you can incentivize that type of behavior. And it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm supporting my corporate overlords. So even these names can only go so far. It's a good rallying cry for hiring. Of course, the experience is helpful, but like, is Jade Raymond, I say this with all due respect, a name really worthy of making noise if she hasn't put anything out in almost a decade now? It's not good enough just to be involved as a name and then like when the game's about to ship, you're out. But someone leaving the studio they founded before their first game ships tells you everything you need to know. If she's out, that tells you probably Fair Games is not in a great spot, given that it was like a CG reveal trailer that Jim Ryan said at the front of a PlayStation showcase. It's like our best lineup ever or something along those lines. And again, we saw how bad that showcase was. There was like very little gameplay. So yeah, I worry a bit about Fair Games. Of course, I don't need to get into it, but Concord speaks for itself. That's another part of PlayStation's live service initiative that is a brilliant failure, like a unheard of failure. And keep in mind that I think the real leader of this live service push should have been the most prestigious studio beneath PlayStation, developers of The Last of Us, developers of Naughty Dog. And I'm not really, I would say, a Naughty Dog stan. Like I adore The Last of Us 1, but I mean, otherwise I think they just make these incredible cinematic experiences, but they're also quietly really great multiplayer developers. And I feel like everyone would have bit on to what they were doing, especially after how great Last of Us Factions was and how great the Uncharted multiplayer was. Like I would love to see a full live service game from Naughty Dog. I bring all this up because Bungie gave feedback to Naughty Dog that resulted in them shutting down Factions. Now, according to an interview with Shuei Yoshida done by my boy Colin Moriarty on Sacred Symbols Plus, this is what Shuei said. The idea for The Last of Us Online came from Naughty Dog and they really wanted to make it, but Bungie explained to them what it takes to make live service games, and Naughty Dog realized, oops, we can't do that. If we do it, we can't make Intergalactic the Heretic profit. So that was a lack of foresight. Based on what I see on the internet, I am more optimistic for Intergalactic than others. So I think ultimately this works out for me and my taste. But it's a shame because I feel like they could have spearheaded the launch of a live service initiative and not just have Helldivers 2 be this like random standout. Like I guess they kind of figured it out there, probably because Arrowhead's just like a really good team and not really thanks to PlayStation or any vision of what this live service future for themselves looks like. But still, I think to me, looking at how disastrous Bungie has been as a company these last number of years and how they've even handled the future of their live service games, excluding Marathon, as we'll talk about in a little bit with Destiny, I just find it so insane that the newly acquired Bungie could come in and basically tell Naughty Dog, like, this is why you shouldn't do this. Like, Naughty Dog is just built different, and they have the capital unlike anyone else. But I can respect Shuei Yoshida and what he has to say. And if it just comes down to, like, hey, they gave advice and Naughty Dog decided to take it, then that is different from what exactly was first framed by the press. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, this last bit here gets into Bungie and why I find it questionable that they were able to give any sort of authoritative opinion on the future of Naughty Dog's live service initiative when they themselves aren't really doing a great job. Because remember, we're talking about the company here that reportedly is not working on Destiny 3 and instead smaller Destiny 2 updates that may be free as of August last year. I say all of this because, my God, I feel like Destiny 3 was the obvious thing to do. And you have to like balance what I've talked about in a lot of videos before, like What do the creatives want to do? What excites them? Because you want to keep them excited to keep working on these products while also serving the business in interesting, fun ways. Could Marathon have taken off in this ideal world and been bigger than anything Destiny could have been? I mean, that's how you sell it to the people funding you. You're like, this will be bigger than Destiny. Of course, like that's game pitching 101. This thing's going to be massive. So no doubt they tricked themselves into that. But I think from the outside looking in, the obvious thing would be to do a Destiny 3, because Destiny 2 sounded like, for me on the outside looking in, as someone who doesn't play a lot of Destiny at all, it was like, oh, these expansions sound really cool, like I'd love to get involved, but oh, you vaulted away like major story content because you guys prey on FOMO, and that doesn't sound like anything I want to get involved in. So it just sounds like it's a group of people who are so attached to the amount of money that they had spent on this game since 2014 that they were like, oh, I'm not going to let go of this journey yet. And so there's never been a break from all of that. And Destiny 3 could have been a great time to refresh that group who was excited and dedicated, at the same time as bringing people like me in who are like, oh, I want to know what's going on with Destiny. But in a post endgame expansion, whatever the hell the name of the final expansion is for Destiny 2, there's been nothing but just these periodic updates that haven't been nearly as good. And it's in that kind of post endgame era like Marvel was in, where they're like, we don't know what we're doing. We kind of just got to the end of what we wanted to do all along for the last 10 years. And like, yeah, we got to like figure some things out, but we need to give you content in the meantime until we get that organized. But to me, again, obvious business decision here is to do a Destiny 3, because putting all your eggs in the Marathon basket, we're seeing what happens there. Like, that's just a really bad decision, dude. So I don't know why Bungie had such strong say in a live service initiative at all, because you have to imagine when PlayStation bought Bungie, they were like, what are you going to do next? And if I were a PlayStation, I heard, oh, you're not making another Destiny, like the main thing that has made you in the modern era, not Halo, Destiny. Okay. You're making Marathon. Oh, you're doing a premium first-person shooter, extraction shooter. Okay. And then Concord happens. Oh, you guys are still doing that. Oh, oh, and like the you're doing layoffs and okay. Now keep in mind also that PlayStation's absorbed a lot of ex-Bungie talent for themselves, and this is just going to result in probably what PlayStation wants, which is this full, complete control over Bungie. And Bungie's already a shell of itself, but it's going to be quite literally that, because this is going to, I hate to say it, I know anyone from Bungie who ends up watching this video, it's not going to be encouraging to hear, but it is going to result in layoffs, I think, one way or another. I don't see a world where, oh my God, they've completely turned it around. You know, Bungie is back on top. Marathon's incredible. Like, this is the type of stuff that people just hate you forever for, you know? And like this type of plagiarism claim that then is confirmed and it's on a massive scale. The fact that Bungie managed to release and create hype for things after getting caught 3, 4, 5 other times is insane to me. That is insane levels of grace. I wasn't fully aware of that. When I saw it, I was like, and people were still excited about their stuff? Oh, man. I know there's that fine line between inspiration and plagiarism, but Jesus Christ, dude, this is ridiculous. So that's all I got for y'all today. This situation continues to get worse, and we'll see where it goes and how Bungie chooses to respond. But until then, look forward to seeing your thoughts down below. Fire away. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.